Sam, why are you suing?
So when you look at the OHL and when you look at my experience in the OHL, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more later, I feel there's not enough respect for the players. Really what we're doing here is trying to get more respect for the players in any way that's possible. And right now we're starting, and the bulk of our argument is that players should get paid minimum wage. When I went through, I wasn't getting paid. I got money for gas to go to the rink and for food on the road. So
how much money?
Maybe $50 a week, or the equivalent spread out, so you get paid every 2 weeks. And so you look at that, and you're promised these scholarship packages, and they're written into contracts. It's in a contract, and you take that as they're binding because they're contracts. And how I came to be involved in this lawsuit is that I found out that it wasn't a binding contract that I signed, or somehow the OHL decided that they didn't have to honor my contract. So I went looking for a lawyer to say, hey, I signed a contract to play hockey for you, to not go to the NCAA, so to come play in the OHL, I want compensation for that. So I went looking for different lawyers, and eventually I found Tina Yang and Ted Charney. And
let me jump in for a second here, because I want to do some of the background. You started playing in the OHL. How old were you?
I was 16, going on 17.
And what team did you play for?
The Niagara Ice Dogs.
And how long did you play for?
I played about half a year, and in that half a year, so you get healthy scratch, you're in and out of the lineup, I played 8 games.
Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed the hockey part. I didn't enjoy the other parts.
Other parts being?
So you have to deal with coaches, and you have to deal with the owners, and you have to go to all kinds of different events and glad hand with rich people that are sponsoring the team, and you see none of that money. And so getting back into what I was saying is that we want respect for the players. In my experience, the players weren't given that respect, so we went looking for lawyers, and Tina and Ted said, hey, look, there's a bigger issue here. The players, you guys are not getting paid to play hockey. You guys are doing the same job that guys are getting paid millions and millions of dollars for in the NHL. And you're 16 and 15, and in some cases 15 until 20. You're still growing as young adults. This is something we need to pursue. And I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'd never thought about it that way when I was going through, because you're a player, you just want to play so bad. My dad played in the NHL. I grew up, there was nothing I wanted to do besides that. And so you don't think about these teams and the way they take advantage of you, but they really do. And that's the way they're able to take advantage of you, because you want it so bad.
We should mention, Toronto Maple Leaf fans may remember, Bill Berg, who played how many years ago? Maybe 20 years ago?
Yeah, so he played from about 92 to 95 for the Leafs, I think. And I was born in 96 when he'd just been traded to the New York Rangers.
Gotcha. Yeah. He scored a late overtime goal that was, I remember it to this day. Jake, let's get you into this conversation as well. From your vantage point, what's this case about?
Well, it's one of those things where I think an OHL experience really differs from player to player and from organization to organization. So Sam, speaking to what his experience was there with Niagara, it's not the only one who's having something along those lines. And sometimes it does, once they're gone, once their OHL careers are over, they're sort of wondering, what's next, what happened there from looking back on their career. Speaking with some former players, I mean, there are some who are the same thought process as Sam does. That the fact that, maybe they have some compensation earned from their OHL playing days. Saying that, there's also a large contingent of players, and I'm sure Sam is well aware, that aren't on the same wavelength. That they think, I was given the opportunity during my later teen years to live out a potential dream, to give pro hockey a kick at the can and see if I can get that opportunity. So really, there is a varying opinions when it comes from former players, even players in the league right now. They you know, it's no one's dream to play in the OHL and then go and get their education after that. Guys want to play pro. Guys want to make it to the NHL or make some sort of living from it. So when that doesn't always become a reality, some players, they are looking at the opportunities they were given and say, you know, maybe I should have been compensated from that. So there is a bit of a split. And I know I have a few former OHLers who write for my website, and the ones who I have write for my website, they're in the mindset where they thought they were compensated properly during their playing days.
Correctional Services Minister, Community Safety Correctional Services Minister Sylvia Jones called the previous Liberal legislation the most anti-policing legislation in Canadian history. You think that's accurate?
As an academic, I'd want to see the empirical basis on which such an assertion was made, and I haven't seen one. This type of rhetoric, I think, we've seen this coming from this administration in other places before. I'd call it somewhat Trumpian. No, this is just too, you know, it's populist. It garners the base, it gets the base mobilized and concerned on an issue.
Well, as a guy wearing a uniform beside you, did you feel that the previous administration's legislation was the most anti-cop in Canadian history?
Well, as both a chief of police and an academic, I can say that, no, I didn't think that. I felt that the Liberals certainly had an interest in making things better, which is good. I think they did their consultation. But in the end, I mean, every government has the opportunity to make it better. And really, that act was in place for a month or two before the current government came in and made changes. So, in fairness, I would suggest that the current government has done their best to make it more transparent, more accountable, and more timely for frontline police officers and the public.
The use of language, Wendy, is interesting here because, well, we know the Ford government has planted its flag firmly on being sort of pro-cop and supporters of the police, and you know, that's where they're coming from. That's fine. They also use language like the police are our everyday heroes. What inference do you draw from that kind of reference?
I think that community groups would rightly be concerned about that kind of language, just because it ascertains that the government is taking the police side automatically, and that de facto they're going to believe the police account of certain interactions. And that's dangerous, right? That's why we need police oversight. That's why we need independence. And the suggestion, you know, from the Attorney General and from Sylvia Jones, the Minister of Community Safety, saying that yes, police are heroes. For sure, we can talk about police. They do a great job. They do a hard job, and we need to acknowledge that. But on the other hand, it's dangerous to assume that they are heroes.
Bruce, what's your view on that?
It's nice to hear some positive about policing. You know, the vast majority of our uniform and civilian members in police services are all professionals, and they do a great job every single day. We always have that one case that makes the news and we get the bad story, but generally officers and civilians do the job professionally. So it's nice to have support of government, and the public supports us. I mean, the stats have shown that the public support professional policing in Ontario. So it's nice to hear.
Akwasi, everyday heroes?
Yeah, absolutely, they do a difficult job. And I think that the danger comes in that such language reinforces that divide between the people and the police that we see in many communities. And ultimately, if the goal is public safety, we should be working together and fostering this collectively rather than building a gulf between these two parties. And unfortunately, as one of my colleagues, Kanika Samuels, wrote in the Star recently, the way in which the government presented this bill only reinforces this us versus them mentality and kind of flips this idea that, you know, in many communities, people often feel that they're always suspect, and that was flipped to suggest that the police were always suspect.
Chief Stevenson, you mentioned a little while ago with the SIU and some of the changes that have come into that Special Investigations Unit, and we just want to put a few points up here. Sheldon, if you would, let's bring this graphic up just to talk about some of the changes to the legislation that are now encased. The Comprehensive Ontario Police Services Act 2019 now maintains mandatory notification of the SIU under specified circumstances, for example, a serious injury or death, and when there was a use of force. It removes the ability of the SIU to investigate civilians who may have been involved in criminal conduct resulting in an incident, and it requires the SIU to explain delays every 30 days past the 120-day mark of an ongoing investigation. And Chief, I'll go back to you on this because you touched on this earlier. What's noteworthy about these changes?
If I may, back to the police heroes for 2 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely, our frontline officers are heroes. And I think too many, excuse me, too many times we celebrate the problems and the issues. If I may, 7 o'clock this morning, I got notified of a young person in a mental health crisis who walked up to one of my officers' cars with a knife to his throat and wanted to be suicide by cop. And it was their professional judgment that saved that kid's life. That is a hero.
Rachel, do we have, I mean, is it appropriate to use the word shocking to describe, in your view, what's going on in Ottawa right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And this attempt to downplay, look, Mr. Sorbara's attempt to sort of downplay this as the regular business of government, this happens all the time, is just completely untrue. This is genuinely a scandal because what's at stake is the integrity of our system of government. What's at stake is whether we are actually a country governed by the rule of law or not. Now, look, for non-lawyers, this may seem kind of wonky, but decisions around who gets prosecuted criminally and how that happens and whether that's independent of political actors, it's actually a really fundamental principle of our system and really important to keep that separate from all the political machinations that go on around other files. Okay. So this is actually really different, and really what is at stake is the integrity of our system of governance. Like there's no kind of way of sugarcoating that. And so yes, this is a scandal. It should be a scandal because the stakes are so high.
All right, let's understand, again, Greg Sorbara, you wanted to bring up the Taverna situation, where the allegation is that the Premier sort of cooked things so to reduce the standards, the qualifications for the next OPP chief in order to have his friend considered when he otherwise would not have been considered. Again, I want to get an understanding of the nature of this kind of situation. Would you call this a shocking, scandalous situation?
No, I would call it a scandal, a simple scandal. Again, go back to the definition. An event that, or an action that is morally or legally wrong and gives rise to public outrage. That's a pretty clear definition. The scandal here is simple, and that is this. It doesn't matter how qualified a candidate is to be the commissioner of the OPP. He could be the very best on the face of the earth. He can't take the job if he is a close personal friend of the Premier.
Why not? It's the Premier's appointment.
That's right. No, it's the Cabinet's appointment.
Well, who runs the Cabinet?
Well, it's a Cabinet appointment. The reason is because the OPP regularly, over the course of the history of our government, may be investigating someone in that government, including the Premier or one of his ministers. Look at the previous government. Pat Sorbara was being investigated. David Livingston was being investigated. Laura Miller was being investigated by the OPP. If the commissioner is a very close friend of the Premier, he is compromised in his ability to make a decision as to whether or not, you can be sure that those things in the previous government went to the commissioner for an okay or not an okay. And it has never happened. When Dalton McGuinty appointed the commissioner of the OPP, he appointed Julian Fantino. And he did so because there was a very good distance. Julian was a conservative, a good cop. He had worked very hard. He was worthy of the job. You just can't make the chief of police your close personal friend who comes to your barbecue. It doesn't work. It's not legally wrong, but it's morally wrong, and it did give rise to public outrage.
Shaggy Nash, is this a shockingly scandalous situation that the Premier may have tried to insert his friend as the Chief Commissioner of the OPP?
I think it is also a scandal. Just as we said, SNC-Lavalin is a scandal because there's an attempt or perceived attempt to compromise the prosecutorial system. This is a perceived attempt to influence the highest level of policing in our province. And I remember when the police used to have these stickers on their cars and they would give them out, whether you support the police, and that was deemed to be not acceptable because it was politicizing the role of the police. In other words, I may not want to have a sticker. Does that mean you're going to give me a ticket and not give somebody else a ticket? If I'm the premier and you're my best friend, am I not going to come down hard on you when I should? People need to know that the rule of law will prevail and that the police are enforcing the law. And in that enforcement, there is complete independence.
Presumably, it could have had the, for the Premier's point of view, perversely opposite effect, which is that if a sticky issue came onto Ron Taverner's desk as Chief Commissioner of the OPP, he might have, in an attempt to bend over backwards and seem untouched by his friendship, he might have been tougher on the Premier and the Premier's government than he might otherwise have been. Can you imagine that scenario?
I can imagine it, but I don't think we want to put ourselves as a province in that situation. I do think there needs to be that independence, that clarity, that confidence of the people of Ontario that their law enforcement system is not going to fall prey to the political will.
Let's talk about something that actually garnered a lot of attention just a few weeks ago because there was a great deal of fuss right here in the capital city of the province of Ontario. Some anti-vaxxers took out some billboards and they drew a lot of attention. And I think actually we've got a couple of examples. There they are right there. And again, for those listening on podcast, I'll describe these a little bit. The one on the left there says, no shots, no school, not true. And it's put up, it says, educate before you vaccinate. And this group is called Vaccine Choice Canada, which sounds like, I mean, who's against choice? It's a very nice to have choices in life. And it is a picture of a kid sitting on the steps with a doll, looking not too good. And then there's another one on the right that says, how many is too many? Who decides? And it's a bunch of vials of vaccines. And again, the tagline, educate before you vaccinate, Vaccine Choice Canada. Natasha, when you saw this, what'd you think?
I was horrified, to be honest. And it goes back to, again, what I was saying about how the anti-vaccine groups do beautiful communications, and these are lovely pictures. It also really resonated with me because I was interested when I was listening to your conversation with Dan about how did you get your kids vaccinated? I mean, that's the commonest question I ever had. And I would have very long conversations with people about MMR and autism, and at the end, the only thing that really made a difference was whether or not I'd had my kids vaccinated, which of course I have.
Powerful information.
I mean, it speaks to whether I'm credible and whether I believe what I'm saying. So I totally get it. But I'm also from the very target group that is vaccine hesitant, in that I'm a white, educated, I happen to be UK born, but I could have been Canadian born, and a woman. And when you look at the pictures that Vaccine Choice included in those billboards, those are those kids as well. They're a very privileged group of society often. And I think it's a really interesting sociological aspect to this that we haven't talked about. You know, women have struggled to be heard often in society. And women of my generation grew up in a very male-dominated world. And when we were having kids, we're often not listened to in the healthcare sector. And so some of the narrative I heard when I was a mother of young kids from other anti-vaccine mothers, which I did, and this is in the UK, it wasn't in Canada, but I hear the same narrative here. It was about really disrespecting authority because people were reclaiming it for themselves. And there is a feminist angle to this, which we haven't, we haven't gone into, but I feel like I'm part of that community, and it resonates with me at the same time as being horrified by the messages, because this isn't a game, and this is about children's lives. One of the problems which I was thinking about when I was listening to Dan is one of the biggest challenges with vaccines is they do nothing. Vaccines actually do nothing. Most of the time, nothing happens. And most of the time, your kid, you don't see anything. You don't see any benefit. And when everybody's getting vaccinated, you don't see the diseases either. So there's nothing to see to be scared of. And so, but as soon as enough people stop vaccinating, then your kid will get measles eventually. It will track you down. So I can see why parents feel they can question and make other decisions. And I can see why Vaccine Choice Canada can come up with the narratives it has, but it's all an illusion. This is not a game, and kids will get really seriously harmed as a result of this kind of communication.
I find the conclusion that you came to fascinating, because I would have thought that all of the qualifications that you put on the table would have demanded the exact opposite conclusion.
Yeah.
The fact that you're a mother, the fact that you've vaccinated your own children, the fact that you're a professional, the fact that you're educated, the fact that you've got that fantastic accent in which everything sounds so much better than the rest of us sound, those seem like 5 or 6 really great reasons to believe you. Why wouldn't they?
Well, I think what it boils down to really is relationships. And if you have, and it goes a bit back to what I was saying about Dan's, the importance of role of people like Dan, that it's that individual relationship you have. So if somebody knows me, then they may believe me, but if they don't know me, then they won't. They'll believe their friends, and they'll believe people who are like-minded and people who are living in, you know, we talk about the echo chambers or these social silos that people are in. And so they'll believe messages from organizations like this.
Well,
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.